welcome or welcome back. I'm Stacey. I've come to film a video today in a little kind of window of time because I have a house full of poorly people. Everybody's got the flu, which means, as the astute of you will have worked out, that I'm gonna get it next. It's not very nice being the only healthy person in the house because you know it's a matter of when and not if one of them gets you, because it's your job to run around making sure everybody has water and Calpol and paracetamol and ice lollies and whatever other snacks, and it's just a matter of time, guys. They're all going to be fine next week and I'm going to feel like death ever so slightly warmed over. So with that in mind, I might film 2 videos today if I can get the time. So if you see me wearing this next time, it's not that I just live in one outfit all the time, it's that I film twice in one day. So first up, I thought I would talk to you about some of the non-fiction that I've been reading lately. A really good chunk of non-fiction. I find it easier than fiction. I'm not going to lie. I find it an awful lot easier to dive into a non-fiction book and get really wrapped up in the subject matter than I do to get engaged in a fictional story. It's not that I don't love fiction, it's just in terms of reliability is the wrong word, but consistency. I am much more likely to identify and pick non-fiction books that I end up loving than I am to pick fiction books. It seems much more trial and error with fiction. There's a lot more there that can go wrong or sort of not quite click. So I thought I'd talk about some of the fiction books that I've been reading recently. So I'm going to start with, what am I going to start with? I'm going to start with this one because it's the biggest. I'll hold it up and then I can put it down again. So this is My Trade by Andrew Marr. Andrew Marr, anyone in the UK will be familiar with, is quite a well-known journalist and news broadcaster. He does an awful lot of political podcasts and he does an awful lot of political television presenting. But obviously his start was in print journalism, and this is a mini biography of his time. It says it's a short history of British journalism. It's not. It's a short history of his time in British journalism, which is fine. But if anybody's thinking that this is going to start way back when and work through, it does briefly, like whistle stop. But the bulk of it is concerned with his career and how that kind of developed. It's very readable. It looks big. This looks like a big hardback. But actually, there's a lot of references at the back. The print's I don't know if you can see that. The print's fairly chunky and the paper is thick. So this actually is a quicker read than its heft kind of gives the impression of. It's very readable, it's very passable. I recommend the audiobook, in all fairness, if you're interested in this. Andrew Marr's got a very listener-friendly voice. Like I say, it's why he works so well on broadcast television and podcast platforms. And I found the audiobook, I knew I wasn't going to be able to hold that for the whole time. I found the audiobook of that an awful lot easier to digest and get through. It's not long, it didn't take me very long at all. But it was interesting. Andrew Marr's very self-deprecating, some of which doesn't always come across as entirely sincere. I find it hard to believe that somebody could be that successful in certainly British journalism in the 80s, 90s and 2000s without having a certain element of ruthlessness, and without, I don't think anyone could genuinely be that self-deprecating, who could genuinely believe that, oh, I don't belong here, I don't deserve it, I'm not talented, I'm not as good at as everyone else is. I don't think you could genuinely believe that and walk into a 90s British newsroom without them just skinning you alive, because that's not the environment that British journalism fosters. So some of it isn't always entirely believable, but it's very charming, it's very engaging, and it's an interesting kind of insight into some of the to's and fro's of different newspapers during that period, and some of the political interviews that he did, and engaging with some of those people. It's an interesting look. It's not as in-depth as I would have hoped. I picked that one up having really enjoyed his History of Modern Britain and Making of Modern Britain. I read both of those and really enjoyed them. And I was hoping for a similar kind of approach to journalist and broadcasting history, but it doesn't quite have that same vibes. Readable and pleasant, but not the same thing. Next up, we have David McKittrick and David McVeigh's Making Sense of the Troubles. This is a reread for me. I've read this before and I was revisiting it because the Troubles are quite a complex understatement, quite a complex period in history, and it's not something that I just can digest and memorise who everybody is and when things happened and sort of the to's and fro's and back and forths. So I've revisited this again. I like this one. It's a really complex subject to kind of discuss. It's certainly a really complex subject to write about without... It sort of gets into the same territory that the BBC gets into, where everybody thinks it's biased because they're giving a platform to so-and-so. So this is quite a balanced, I think, quite a balanced account. I don't think anybody comes out of it showered in glory at all times, but nor do I think anybody comes out of it having behaved as unreasonably as perhaps they are sometimes portrayed. And certainly my sympathies shifted and shifted back again and shifted again throughout this. I think every time you hear about an individual family being ripped apart by something horrendous, it's hard not to just see the human costs of it as opposed to the broader political impacts. It's an interesting one, would recommend. Next up we had, I bought this used, I haven't actually done this to this book, it came like this, The Unthinkable. So the subtitle for this is Who Survives When Disaster Strikes and Why. So this book specifically looks at when significant disasters occur, who lives and who dies, what split-second decisions do we make as individuals that make the difference between the person who makes it out and the person who doesn't. It's by Amanda Ripley. She looks at 9/11, she looks at I can't remember which, was it the Zeebrugge ferry disaster? She looks at she looks at a number of different disastrous events, and she looks at the choices that individual people made when things went wrong. So this isn't necessarily about planning beforehand and who happened to be in the right place at the right time. This is about people who were in, from the start point when everything goes wrong, who were in roughly the same situation, but once the disaster started to unfold, made different choices that took them in different directions, and some of them survive and some of them don't. It's really interesting. It looks into interesting parts of human psychology and how we respond in emergencies and how we respond to panic and the unknown and the faith that we put in structures that we believe we should be able to trust. Yeah, it's really interesting. I said she makes mention in here about the number of people inside the World Trade Center who took the time to shut down, save work and shut down their computers correctly before evacuating the building. And it is that, I mean, 9/11 was obviously unprecedented in terms of just the size of that day. So you can't in any way blame anybody for not thinking, oh, what if both of these buildings fall down? Because nothing like that had ever happened before. So it's unfair to kind of look through the lens of the future and sort of go, why would you bother? You know, but that's, you know, and you sort of think, well, actually, when you've been in a building where a fire alarm's gone off, have people stopped and collected their coats and got their bags and, you know, finished up whatever memo they were writing or what have you before they've evacuated, because they've assumed it was a drill or they've assumed it's not near them or whatever it is. We've all kind of not necessarily responded to an emergency as though it is an emergency, and we've seen people do that. And this is really interesting because, like I say, different choices and different people in the moment, markedly different outcomes. It's a really interesting study of that. Next up, what am I going to do? I'm going to do this one because I'm going to have a moan. So I read this. This is called Night Witches of World War II. It's by Graham Derrickson. This is slim. This is a slim volume. It is less than 115 pages. I think it's 111 pages. I would not have bought this if I picked it up in a shop, but I didn't. This was recommended in sort of the Amazon, you liked this, so you might like this list. And I asked for it as a gift for my birthday. My brother and I buy each other books every year, and I asked for this and a couple of others. I was really interested in the subject matter of this, which is the Russian women who flew as pilots in World War II. They were bomber pilots, and the crews that sort of serviced those regiments. I was really interested in this. It was an area of World War II history that I knew of but didn't know a huge amount about, so I did want to dive in and find out more. When it arrived and I saw how thin it was my fault because I didn't read the Amazon listing. It does say on there that it's only 100 and something pages, and I should have known that it would be small. So I was a little disappointed when it turned up and it was like pamphlet sized, novella sized. I was even more disappointed when I started to read it and it became apparent that this is essentially a hobby that made it to print. Somebody, well, the author, is interested in history vaguely and decided to write down a selection of things that he found out about these women and then print it. It does not appear that any editing went into this at all. It repeats itself over and over and over again, which for such a short book, it is very repetitive. He tells you the same few facts about individual people over and over and over again. When you get to the back and you look at the references, I could understand why this was such a frustrating read. Of the references, 10 of them are Wikipedia pages. There are YouTube videos cited as sources for this, and the bulk of the rest of the sources are web pages and newspaper articles that are published online, and he gives the website address of the newspaper article as the source. There is almost no historical research that's gone into it. This is a Google version of historical research. This is what you get when an A-level student needs to find out about World War II. And I was really irritated throughout. I felt like I had to finish it. If it had been longer, I'd have DNF'd. But because it was so short, I thought I can't not read 110, 111 page book. You might as well finish it. It was also a gift, and I always feel a bit sort of as though I should read things that people buy for me. And it was a gift that I asked for, so it felt even more what have you. But this was really irritating. This really annoyed me because the subject is so interesting and there is so much material out there that this author could have accessed. Two of the women that he mentions have their own books. One of them kept a journal through her time as a pilot, which has been published, and another one wrote her autobiography after the war. Both of those books were published before this thing, so he could have got hold of both of those and read them and found out these women's accounts of these events. He didn't have to... Wikipedia did not need to be the main source of information for this. He could even have got hold of this, which is Night Witches by Bruce Miles. This was published in 1980, I want to say 2 or 3, might be 4. I'm going to have to check now. I don't really have to check, I could have just made it up. But it was 82, 1982. So again, decades before this thing was cobbled together. This is fine. This has a lot of information. It has photos. It has sources, proper cited sources for information. This thing is a good example of what happens when people self-publish and think that they can do it in a vacuum with nobody proofreading it who isn't directly related to them or a very close friend. This is why second opinions matter before things go to print. Ask someone who doesn't like you very much to read your book. and get them to be honest. They will be doing you a favour. This, I'm annoyed. Anyway, moving on. Last up, we have War in the Shadows. Now, This Is Me. These tabs are all me, which gives you a rough idea of how much I enjoyed this. This is War in the Shadows by Patrick Marnham. This is Resistance, Deception and Betrayal in Occupied France. This deals with a number of things. It deals partly with deception in the French resistance. So it touches on Jean Moulin. It touches on the problems within the resistance networks in France during the Nazi occupation and the infiltration of the Nazis into those networks successfully, and the betrayal of certain high up figures in the resistance to the Nazis that resulted in their arrest and subsequent execution. It also deals in quite a lot of detail with the collapse of the Prosper network in France and the SOE's involvement with the French resistance. For those who know, you'll be aware that there is some, I don't know what the wording is, I'm not the right person to discuss this really. There is some controversy around SOE's Prosper network, which collapsed after it was betrayed to the Nazis. Betrayed to the Nazis is difficult because it was also infiltrated by Nazis who just happened to stumble upon information. It was all a bit of a mess. But there were agents working within SOE who were also working with the Nazis and who were passing information on. And the Prosper network fell as a direct result of the information that was passed on. Although the way SOE history was written after the war sort of disputes that. And there is some friction between historians who believe that these accounts of betrayal and double agents and double dealings are conspiracy theorists, and that they are feeding into drama that doesn't really exist in order to make for an exciting story, whilst authors such as Patrick Marnham and Robert Marshall had a book in the 80s that dealt with this as well, believe that this is part of an effort by established military historians who are in the employ of military services to present a sanitised version that saves the reputation of a number of senior military personnel who should have known better and who should have seen the problems that were occurring and the writing that was on the wall for SOE. I'm a bit of an SOE nerd. I could go off on so many tangents, and I'm not going to. This is really good. It's very well written. It's very well researched. Patrick Marnham acknowledges that he knows that he's going to be argued with, that there are going to be people who aren't going to take his read on this situation on board. And he covers that really well, and he kind of deals with it up front. I found this really good, and I really enjoyed it. So yeah, can recommend. So that's it. That's some of the non-fiction that I've been reading. I hope that everybody's well. I hope that everybody's managing to avoid this horrible flu bug that's going around. Pray for me. And I'll see you next time. Thanks very much. Bye bye.